right, everybody. This is part one of our Cthulhu is Hard to Spell Volume 3 anthology series. I have three guests with me right now. Right, you'll see, if you're watching the video, you see all the little squares and everything. If you're on the audio, I don't know what to do for you. But we've got Russell Nolte with us. We got Timothy Fling and Tara Clarkson. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
And you all probably remember Timothy. He was on, were you on last month?
Yeah, it was about, I guess it was a month ago now that you mention it, because it was the previous book.
Yes, so...
back then I was sort of telling you about the one that was coming out, and now we're sort of ankle deep in it.
So Timothy apparently wanted to come back. We were good to him, so...
Yeah, I had a good time, actually.
So, Russ, let's start with you. I guess explain the book to everybody out there.
Sure. So, Cthulhu is Hard to Spell is an anthology series dealing with the gods and monsters of H.P. Lovecraft. So, it came out originally, the first volume in 2018. And the big hook, the big differentiating factor is Lovecraft's work really doesn't deal a lot with the gods and mythos itself. And the whole series is kind of a celebration of the mythos part of Lovecraft. When crafting an anthology series about H.P. Lovecraft, there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of not only Lovecraft's own work, which is basically anthology short stories, very heavily because he serialized a lot of his work, but it is then people came on, and there's basically 100 years in a relatively unbroken chain of Lovecraft anthologies that have come out either from H.P. Lovecraft collections or from people who were inspired by Lovecraft collections. But there's not. I mean, there's stuff that deals with the mythos, because you can't have 100 years of work without dealing and delving into the actual mythos side and the gods themselves. But comparatively, there's very little that kind of collects stories about the gods and monsters themselves. And Lovecraft's original work doesn't do that either. It's not, his stuff is very horror focused, and he basically invented cosmic horror, but the monsters themselves, because they're unknowable and unthinkable and unfathomable, kind of play an off-camera role for 90% of the story. And if they even appear, they appear at the very, very, very end of the story and wreck stuff, and then leave everyone worse off for wear. And then the story ends. So this collection was really what if instead of doing that, we focused the light on the Lovecraft gods and monsters themselves. And in doing so, we could tell different kinds of stories. So there are some definitely Lovecraftian stories in the tradition of Lovecraft, meaning weird person goes to weird town, makes a weird deal, finds weird cult, unlocks unfathomable monster, and in that kind of vein, or cosmic horror vein. But there's also cute stories and silly stories and slice of life stories and fantasy stories and science fiction stories and dramatic stories, and kind of all over the spectrum as far as what comic creators do. And the one rule is that the story has to focus or have a focus on one of the gods or monsters from the universe itself.
So in each volume of this anthology, do you also do a story in it?
I do.
What is your story this time?
This story. So one of the biggest complaint that we've had about the series is that the covers of the books, which everyone loves, don't correlate to any of the stories inside of the book. So I wanted to change that this time. And the for the final one, I really wanted to use Royal Rumble, but I was not going to get away with using Royal Rumble. So I chose Battle Royale, and the big cover is Cthulhu jumping off the pylon onto Zeus. And so the story inside that Eric and I did is the the 3 parts, 12 pages, 4, 4, 4 in the beginning, middle, and end of the Lovecraftian gods versus the mythological gods with the fate of the universe hanging in the balance.
Awesome. So I guess we'll go around the table. Timothy, what was your story in this anthology?
Oh, okay. My short story, and first, thanks for having me, guys. That's always just a real thrill to do these things, and I'm just really want to say thanks. The first short story we did for the anthology, it was called The Error of the Last Acolyte, and I'm under direct instructions to not spoil the storyline, so I will just tell you. It is a 1970s sci-fi take on a Lovecraftian tale. In this case, taking the form of some mysterious monks and an unspeakable monstrous. So other than that, I would encourage you to read the story. And this was penciled by my friend and partner, Renan Shoddy. And we've kept working together, by the way, after the story we did. And I just wanted to give him a shout out because he's just been a terrific creative partner for me, and really happy with the way that things turned out. And I hope people enjoy this story. There's one more element that's roughly connected. I don't know, maybe I'll let Russell mention that, but some people know there's a song that goes with it too. So I was involved in the making of that, and it was just really a terrific experience the whole way around. Honestly, we had so much fun, me and the gang that did our contribution. So, but I hope you love the story. I would say that if you love Lovecraft, you'll see his elements in our short story. And if you also are a little bit like also kind of like weird sci-fi, you also will probably like our story.
So when you say 70s sci-fi, my brain, because there's only one sci-fi in my world, and that's Star Wars. Are we got Star Wars vibes, or?
Maybe not necessarily Star Wars, but I'll tell you, I approach the term Star Wars pretty broadly. I should mention very quickly, I'm not like a hater. Like, I generally like almost all Star Wars things, right? So, and some of that, I guess, is the way I grew up. So, our other series definitely has some pretty strong Star Wars elements. What I mean by that is that it's not a very hard sci-fi. The emphasis is on the fantastic elements of a sci-fi world. But in the case of our short story for the Cthulhu anthology, it's a little bit darker. I would just say that, and it would be more along the lines of like your Silent Running, Logan's Run, those the Charlton Heston era of 70s sci-fi dialogue. And I think even when you hear the dialogue, it'll even ring to you a little bit, because I got a terrific kick out of writing dialogue. I always like weird creatures and the way they communicate with each other. And in this case, the assignment of these weird monks, I had fun making it. So I really hope you guys dig it, man. I'd really like to see the sequel.
That sounds cool. And last but certainly not least, Tara, how about your story?
Mine is a story called Delivery that my writing partner, Kang Jing, who does the artwork for it, and I put together. And it's funny to mention Star Wars, because it's basically, for me, it was my reflection on kind of like what Star Wars means to me, and what resistance looks like on a ground level and how you keep it going. And so I picked the most random of all Lovecraft monsters. It was like the Spiders of Lang. And it starts with the main character fleeing this spider, and it just kind of goes on from there. But it's pretty fun. It's a little 4-pager.
So I guess any of you could answer this, really. For someone kind of like myself, I would say moderate to low knowledge of Lovecraft stuff. Do you think that someone like me could get into this anthology?
I think it was made for people like you. Like, we made it so the original instinct was, I asked all of my fans who had supported all of our work before, like, what do you want? And they all said a Lovecraft anthology. I was like, okay, like, that's very broad. Like, why? And like, what specifically? And the general consensus was, what they wanted was, as a fan of Lovecraft, it has a very high barrier to entry. Like Lovecraft has a very high bar, especially to understand the lore. So they wanted something that they could kind of like bring people and indoctrinate into the mythos. And so that was one of the reasons we chose to focus on the gods and monsters themselves, was because like that's the easiest way into the lore. Like that's the thing that Lovecraft, like his explanations of gods would be like an unfathomable being stood before me, or like an unknowable light, or when they did the color of it's not the color of light, the color out of space. Like the big thing for Nick that they did when they remade that was like Lovecraft kind of just says like an unknowable, or an unknowable like color. And you're like, okay, well that's great. Like, how do I make an unknowable color knowable? And that's why the film is magenta, because magenta doesn't actually exist as a color. So it's like that was the easiest one to be like, oh, like clearly if you have an unknowable color, an unnatural color, it would be what would be there, because like it doesn't actually exist. So we did the origin myth, we did some retellings, and we just did a lot of like of lore building that all has its basis in Lovecraft's works. So, for instance, there was a story which was Orn and Numqua, who are like the Ross and Rachel of the Lovecraft universe, as much as anyone can be, and like they're in marriage counseling. So it's like that would never happen in Lovecraft's world. But if you come across Orn and Numqua, like you will understand kind of that they have this dysfunctional marriage relationship. There's a story in this one where Shub-Niggurath, the Black Goat of the Woods, like has a lot of kids. It's just like that's her thing, like birthing thousands of like Lovecraftian horrors. And there's a story of like an adventurer coming along around her, and like she like pulls out a wallet and is like showing all of the kids off. So again, like that would never happen in Lovecraft's world. But if you come across that, we hope that you would be like, oh, I get like which one they're talking about. It's the one with the million kids. And we really made it. It's wonderful because no one really focuses on this outside of, I think it's Chaosium, the people that make the Call of Cthulhu game. Like very few books have ever dealt with Lovecraft's, like the lore of it specifically. It's something that real hardcore Lovecraft fans like really get into, because like it helps like their own knowledge of the world. But what it's really for is that someone who loves Lovecraft can be like, you know that thing I've been trying to get you into for like a decade? Here, like try this, and then maybe you'll understand the world. Because he really did not. He was not easy. Well, he was not easy just as a period human, but he was not easy on readers. He would name a god like in one paragraph in one story, and like you just had to know that was the one story. You had to read the whole thing to get any idea, and if you missed that one paragraph, like you just didn't know that god existed.
Yeah, so I'll go down my knowledge of Lovecraft. The episode of South Park, I watched Lovecraft County. That was a good show. And I know he has a cat that we can't say on the internet because it's very offensive. And that's about it for my Lovecraft knowledge. But
were any of us fans of Alan Moore's Neonomicon, or did anybody read that one?
I didn't personally, but I knew a lot of people who did. And I know Alan was a big Lovecraft guy as well. Because he did... Is Necronomicon a Lovecraft thing?
Yeah.
Well, this was kind of Alan Moore's twist on it, I guess you would say. And it's pretty well done. And I sometimes steer people toward it if they are... Well, it's like Russell said, it's not the most accessible read. So sometimes if you're trying to explain the mythos, you might benefit from showing them Neonomicon. It's something that they can... It's very visual, for one thing.
Yeah.
It's a little bit... And by the way, I feel that it's like a really loving tribute to him as well. I think that he really kind of nails it. That's why I mention it.
So there's always, in my eyes, I mean, there's many different kinds of anthologies, but I separate them into kind of two categories. And I would like to know what kind this is. We have a single theme or idea, in this case, Cthulhu. and just all the stories are random. And then the other one is where things are kind of interconnected in some way. Are any of these stories interconnected at all, or are they all just kind of what they are?
So the anthology has a theme, of Lovecraft, but each story has each volume has like an idea behind it, which is the first book, the gods are planning their invasion. The second book, the gods have invaded and taken over, or in the process of invading and taking over. And in this one, the third one, it's mythological gods and humanity, and like things are coming along to try and push back this invasion. And so in that way, I hope they're interconnected. But in the like, do these things cross over with each other? Like, they don't cross over in that way. They just kind of live in this kind of world, and I hope that you can soak it up. But I don't know, Tara, what do you think?
I think the theme is really strong. And yeah, I didn't notice individual stories really interacting with each other as like this is part of a shared universe in a really knowing kind of way. But the theme is really strong, I think. Even between all the like wildly different ones, like you said, some are just really, really funny. Some are really scary. Still like all ages. But yeah, I think the theme is really well tied together and the stories are just very separate.
So at no point are you trying to hit story beats to get to a certain point?
No, I don't think so.
I think that's why I did the 3 different segments of my story, the 12 pages that broke up, because like there's at least like thematically, like there's like the beginning of the book is kind of like they're playing the attack is happening, the all chaos is kind of going on in the middle, and then like there's like a kind of resolution in the end.
That's a really cathartic framing. That's awesome.
So for the anthology itself, then, and I guess anyone could really answer this. How did actually anyone but Russ? I want to answer this. Sorry, Russ. I know he does a submission process for this. How was that submission process for you two, and what was it like from your point of view? I guess we can start with Tara.
Tara, go first.
Sure, yeah. It was pretty neat for me. I have not. This was one of my first pitches to ever submit anywhere, and it was a mountain. It was like would have been a dream come true to get into it, because just everything that I love in stories seemed to be in this anthology, and the caliber of talent in the previous it was just. Yeah, I'm still kind of reeling all these months later, but I had put forward a pitch for a story that was too long, and I got word back. It's like, okay, well, I like the idea. It's too long. Can you make it shorter? And I did, and it didn't quite make it. It almost made it, but then something opened up. There was a little more room, and it got in, and that was a huge day. But it was neat. It was a really neat experience. Yeah.
Timothy?
In my case, we were intentionally trying to write stories to be submitted for anthologies. And I knew about Russell's anthology, and really from scratch, I had the target painted on that one. And I sort of got lucky even too to get partnered up with the artist I did. And, sometimes lightning kind of strikes you. And I think that happened here. And I've been very fortunate throughout the process. I was pretty stoked, I'll tell you that. This was my first big submission to it, like a major publisher, right? So I was going to bring my A game. So we pretty much had all the elements plotted out, and even the test pages done before the submissions even closed. The goal was to have the darn thing wrapped up and kind of try to be the first one. I don't think I was quite first, but it was an intentional, hey, we're going to try and get in this anthology. Actually, there was this one, there was 2. The other one is the Planet Comics arrangement. I got a little arrangement going with them where some of the short stories are anthologized into Planet Comics. So by some weird quirk, Planet came out first, but technically Cthulhu is Hard to Spell is my first anthology that I was published to. So thanks so much for the opportunity. I really learned a lot from it. And I told Russell this in the last podcast. The book hasn't even come out yet. And I feel I've got a professional bump from it. My mailing list has gone up, which is something I watch very closely. And I'm starting to generate a little bit of traction with some of my other works. When I say traction, I mean I've got a little bit better Kickstarter following. I've got a little bit better engagement on some social media. These are small victories, right? But they're small steps, and it's helping me to get there. So I'm really grateful for the experience of being with the anthology.
Those are huge victories, in my opinion. I get one more person to listen to this show. It's a huge victory.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel you. I do.
And it was really two very different sides of like the anthology with Tara and Timothy, because Timothy's work I knew from the Hunchback of Quadrant, whatever the quadrant
19.
is, I forget, Quadrant 19. And like I remember reading that book and being like, what? Like this, it was so beautiful and so weird, and like it was a thing that like at that moment. And then I read Water Wars after that, but I read The Hunchback first, so I was like already a fan.
Okay.
And then I read Water Wars, and like it's so well written, and like the art is so pretty. I was like, well, I want like I want to work with this person. So like, and then he pitched. So there's like two kinds of people who like are creators that I know of that when they pitch, like some of them pitch like very much like this is my lane, and like I'm doing another book in my lane. And often those are easier to accept because you're like, then this is the thing with Timothy's work is like it was in his lane. Like it's very much in the art style, in the tone, in the like everything was like right there. And then there's people like me who tend to go like the opposite side of their lane. And like I do this very violent book, and then I'll have like a slow meditation with Angela Odling about like what it means to like grow up and abandon the things that you love. And like those are two very different, wildly different things. And I think that because of my history, like I tend to get into anthologies even if they're like, but I really want like the one thing. And I'm like, no, I don't do that. Like that is for my long form work. Anthologies are for me to like try different things. And so Timothy, like when he pitched something, A, I already loved his work, and B, like it was in his lane. I was like, well, this is like, I didn't have the final say of this. I mean, I guess I have final say of the submissions, but because I tend to know all of the way more of the people than Chris does, who's the co-editor. She does the submissions, like, and like makes her who comes in, who comes out, play, and like who's on the fence. And like then I come in and I'm like, no, I really like that person, they're in, or like, okay, you made a good decision here. And I like look at the ones that I was like, are these people going to get in based upon Chris's aesthetic? Because aesthetically, it's great to work with Chris. She and me see comics kind of the same. But like as far as connections, I want to make sure that like I'm not giving preference to someone who like is not going to deliver if she doesn't think is going to deliver. Meanwhile, Tara is someone I never like knew before ever, except that she submitted and then relentlessly like messaged me with questions after the submission process or during the submission process. Which I normally do not like. But like that is because they generally bug me about like when am I going to get approved, or like when is it like it's something that's like, whereas her questions were like after we started talking were very much like she was trying to get insight on the work overall, not like getting in to like getting into the submission. And I know that's like a very small like window, right. But like it is a big difference of like I welcome people to ask me questions then when I am not clear or I do not understand, or like I think she asked like how do I find like are the other books like on that can I go to and read the other books, and like I told her where to get the other books, or like there was like some stuff. So like I knew from my experience with her that like she really cared about making a good piece that would fit into the anthology. That and her goal was to get like you don't just send people like 100 text messages, like that's not 100, but like you don't come back to people asking follow-up questions like if you don't really care. So when it came down to like these, there's always the ones that are like these are in for sure, these are out for sure, and then there's all of this big mass that are like, most of them are like, man, well, like I wish they didn't do 8 pages, or like, man, we already accepted this one and this is really thematically similar, or like, man, 8 of these stories are daggone, and like I'm only gonna pick one daggone deep one story. Like I can't have like 10 of these. So like some of them you're like you put in buckets. You're like, here's all the daggone, and then we have too many funny ones. We need sad ones, and we happen to have like, so we have these spaces, and we have people that like we go back to, like we did with Tara, and say like, well, like your pitch is too long. We don't know who you are. So like, we're definitely not going to give you the max amount of pages, even if we knew, even if we had the space. Like, we don't know you, and so we're not going to trust you to deliver a big story. And I think that's something that I always tell creators. If you're pitching someone new and you are new, like 8-page stories are for me are reserved for people that I know are going to deliver, because that is a lot of pages. And I've done anthologies where like brand new artists do 16 pages, and I'm like, oh my God, these are 16 pages and they're just okay. So like, I can't do that ever again. Sometimes people knock it out of the park, but usually they don't. So I went back and I said, hey, can you do that? I don't know. It was like 2 or 4 pages, whatever it was. And then like, it happened that we went some other way after she pitched. And then that person ended up, and then some shenanigans ended up happening, and we had like more space. Someone ended up dropping out of the book who had an 8-page story, and that
you can
allowed
David
us.
Proposa, it's fine.
Yeah, no, it was definitely not him. He delivered an amazing story, like a like perfection story that ends the book. But it was
I love you, David.
Someone had to drop out of the book for reasons, and we had a chance, and we specifically wanted to, because of the way that it all happened. We very much wanted to highlight more women creators, and we happened to have like a bunch of like a set of like amazing like women marginalized group creators, and we were like, well, let's go back to them and like see if they can like, we have space now. Like, this was not, the book was bad, the story was bad. This was like a good story that we really wanted to find a way to get into, but like we just could not do it. So we ended up going back to Tara and another creator, or maybe 2 other creators, to like fill that space. And like so that's 2 very different ways that you can get into an anthology. And I'm so happy that we were able to. I'm not happy with the situation that caused the creator to like drop out, but I am very, very happy that we were able to bring in Tara in, and that she was game. Because sometimes you're not. Sometimes the thing that people do is they will not get a submission, and then they won't say the name of the anthology that like they badmouth, but like they'll just start saying, I got a rejection, and like then trash talk the editor. And I'm like, I'm on social media, like I followed you because you submitted to the anthology, and like I literally know submissions just went out, like rejections just went out, and then 15 minutes later on social media complaining about it. And I'm like, now I really don't want to work with you. And like, there was none of that with Tara, and
social media blaming myself. I was like, I put in something too long. I shouldn't have done it.
That is the absolute number one worst thing you can do as I mean, besides bad mouthing when you get rejected, but almost always anthologies are looking to fill like small spots, like 2-page spots, and at least for me, I'm very wary to take anyone over 2 pages that I don't know will deliver and has a history. I'm worried about taking people who do have a history of like delivering and like for more than 2 pages that I've not worked with before. But like, I'm very wary of somebody, not just because they could be terrible human. They could be a terrible human like that I don't want to work with and I regret having in the anthology. I don't want to spotlight them. But also they could make a story that is lukewarm and not great, or good and not great. And like if you do that, and if you deliver or they could not deliver a story at all. Like if you deliver a story and it's like pretty good but not great, like having it as 2 or 4 pages is like perfectly acceptable, because you just people like, oh, this is, oh, it's done, cool, awesome.
Yeah, those especially Tara here, those 4-page stories, everything are so important. I always tell this story because it's someone I met before she was a big deal, and now she's a big deal and everybody loves her. But everybody here knows who Stephanie Phillips is, right? DC Comics.
Oh, I love Stephanie. Yeah.
And when I met her, she was at a Comic-Con and she just got done doing her first Kickstarter. And she eventually got to one of their anthology books, and she did a 4-page story about Wildcat. Now, other than me and my buddy Mike, I don't think anybody on the planet cares about Wildcat. But she knocked it out of the park, and now 2 years later, she's doing Harley Quinn all the time. So
nice.
Those little 4-page stories are the ones that people look at and go, okay, they can tell a story in 4 pages. They could definitely do it in 20 or 22 or however many pages we're doing comics these days. Yeah. So you got into a little bit of my follow-up question, Russ, which was, what do you look for when people like Timothy and Tara are giving you submissions? Like, are they sending you full stories, or you doing pitches with some character work? Like, what is your submission process like?
Yeah, I don't think it's fair to ask for full scripts or anything until someone's approved, because that's like a lot of work to do. And so I do a pitch. They have to do the pitch, which is like a paragraph or like a log line. Doesn't really matter. In fact, like a log line to me works just as well as like a full pitch for a story, because like I want the vibe. And then the art is essentially important. And I need someone who has done sequential work. And by sequential work, I don't mean 5 like pages of 5 different stories where they have done a page. I mean like someone who has 3 strong 3 to 5 page samples of 3 different books that they have done sequentially, like page 1, then page 2, then page 3. I say sequential work, and then I get all of the time like someone who like gives me page 20 of this story and page 12 of this story and page 3 of this story. And I'm like, that doesn't show me how you can model. And what I'm looking for is, can you stay consistent? Can you stay on model? And can you tell, can you make boring talking head scenes exciting? And really, I mean, that's to me, like, not anyone, but like it's much easier to make a really exciting page exciting than like a talking head. So I want to see how you deal with an entire scene, at least, or a couple of scenes. But I don't ask you to have the pitch, the story done. That's great when you do, when you have concept art or anything like that. But like the thing that people get wrong all of the time is they'll send me concept art, and I'll be like, cool, what art? Can you do art? Like, can you do comics? I don't understand. And what I'm really looking for is the hook. Like, because these stories are small, it's not fair. I'll tell this story about Travis Gibb. Like, Travis Gibb, who I love and was in our last anthology, originally did not make the cut to our last anthology because I thought his Cats of Ulthar story was something we'd done already. Like, I didn't get it. It was very much a simple, like, the pitch was very much like, it's Cats of Ulthar in a trailer park. And I was like, okay, well, we had Megan Hutchinson do the Cats of Ulthar book. Like Megan Hutchinson is like a superstar. Like, I don't want to, like, you can't do another Cats of Ulthar. And so I rejected him because of Cats of Ulthar, because of that. And then he went and did the story. And I was like, this is great. Like, it was very much just like a kind of a twist, like a modern twist on the Cats of Ulthar. But the way that he put it together was, the execution was great. And so I was like, yeah, can I have that, please? I know I said I didn't want it, but like, I really do want it now, please. And that was because the pitch didn't, like, the hook wasn't strong. So a lot of times you will have a pitch and the execution can be great, but in the hook, I really need that one that what's the turn going to be that's going to like make this different. Like Timothy's story has an incredible turn, and you're like, oh. And then when you have a small story, you really need the turn because that's what's going to get people to remember the story. And so that's really what I'm looking for. You can have a little bit not as good turn or not good turn at all if your art is like amazing, or like if I've worked with you a bunch before or something. Like there are all these rules where like I will just like if Angela Odling ever submits, like she's into literally anything I ever do for the rest of my career. She doesn't even need to put a pitch in. She just has to tell me how long it's going to be, and like she's in. Because we've worked together for so long, like we've done books together. She's worked on me with art, so she doesn't need to like pitch me. I'm just gonna accept her like sight unseen, basically. So and she's knocked it out of the park every time we've worked together. So like there are certain people that you just know they're gonna deliver. Like Travis, I'd never worked with before. I didn't ever even work with him on Cthulhu Invades Oz before because he submitted that after. So I didn't know. I knew his work, but I didn't know like how much editorial I would need to do, because some people get there with a strong editor. Some people get there after like a long time, and it's a long process. And some people, you read the end product and you're like, oh, like you're just that good a creator. Like you're in touch with your own soul of like what you need to do. So like that's kind of what I look for, is a really good hook and incredible art. I don't have like a style that I really love the art, but like if you have a much more avant-garde style, you're much better off having a shorter book, having a shorter story, because it's a lot harder for me to give 8 pages to an avant-garde art style, because this is a mass market book.
So all I heard from that whole thing was that you skipped over Travis this time to get the real talent, which was his wife, because you knew you didn't have to edit her. So we're getting close to time. I guess this is just part 1, everybody. We're going to have a part 2. If you're listening to this, it's like 2 seconds after. So I guess before we jump out, let's start with Tara. Where can people find you online, follow you as you go beyond this series and do your own things?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at taraclarkson.comics and Twitter at taraclarkson82. And those are the easiest places to find me because I have my link tree up. So that's got the books that I'm in, the things that I do.
And Timothy, remind everybody where to find you.
The big one for me right now is I'm on Kickstarter under the Water Wars. If you look for that, you will probably find me. Also, I'm on Facebook all the time these days. That's Timothy Fling. That's where I seem to be getting the most followers. I do have a website. That's earthdogstudios.com.
And Russ, I'll let you do this twice in this episode, so tell everybody where to go to find you.
So the easiest way to find me is russellnolte.com, but you can find the book at CthulhuIsHardToSpell.com. That's Cthulhu, Cthulhu. Second H is for horror.
All right, everybody. So go find... you can find the link for the Kickstarter down below in the show notes. I'm going to do this speech twice. Get over it. And make sure to follow everybody here. See their awesome work moving forward. And in the next segment, not only we talk to more creators about their stories, but we'll also get more into the nitty gritty of the Kickstarter in that one. So thank you all so much. And I'll be back in like 5 minutes.